read the verse. لِيَغْفِرَ لَكَ اللَّهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِن ذَنبِكَ وَمَا تَأَخَّرَ وَيُتِمَّ نِعْمَتَهُ عَلَيْكَ وَيَهْدِيَكَ. Surah Al-Fatah.
Surah Al-Fatah number 2.
Yes.
Just
21 बारे में होगी. कौन सा पार्ट है?
1000 का सफ़ा देखा है. 1091 सफ़ा देखा. It begins chapter number 48 in part 26. The surah begins Suratul Fatah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna fatah A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna fatahna laka fathan mubinan liyaghfira laka Allahu ma taqaddama min dhanbika wa ma ta'akhkhara wa yutimma ni'matahu alayka wa yahdiyaka siratan mustaqima. In the name of Allah, the Gracious, the Merciful, verily we have given thee a clear victory, that Allah may cover up for thee thy shortcomings, past and future, and that He may complete His favor upon thee and may guide thee on a right path.
Right.
Doshi would like to know the meaning of sin mentioned in this verse.
But there is no need for any Arabic translation, of course.
No.
You see, this verse, لِيَغْفِرَ لَكَ اللَّهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِن ذَنبِكَ وَمَا تَأَخَّرَ وَيُتِمَّ نِعْمَتَهُ عَلَيْكَ وَيَهْدِيَكَ صِرَاطًا مُسْتَقِيمًا, is completely misunderstood, out of context. The context of this surah, when it was revealed, was Surah Al-Hudaybiyah. When Ahmad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, after seeing a dream that he was performing Umrah and Hajj, went to fulfill this dream to Mecca, and the Meccans stood firmly against granting him this permission. They were adamant that no way can you enter Mecca without shedding of blood. So if you want to force your entry, come on and fight it out. All his companions, without exception, were of the opinion that if this is what they want, this is what they will get. We are ready to offer every drop of blood in this cause, but your dream must be fulfilled. As though the fulfillment of the Prophet's dream lay in the hands of his companions, but it was not so. It was only Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who decided against it. Why? Because he knew the Quran better than anybody else did. He knew that for Hajj there is a precondition, that the passage should be safe. So how could you perform Hajj when the passage is not safe? You can't force your Hajj upon God. So he accepted the embarrassment which was temporarily caused and decided to return as if frustrated in his effort. But he would not violate the injunctions of Allah. This was the greatness of Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's character. Total submission to the will of God, which was rewarded with this verse. Apparently, God tells him he failed to perform Hajj. But what is the sign of a Hajj which is accepted by God? All the previous sins are forgiven. The only Hajj where the future sins are also forgiven is this Hajj. So a Hajj which was not performed apparently was the greatest of all the Hajj ever offered at the path at the altar of God's pleasure, and the sign is sins not of the past but of the future will also be forgiven. But the emphasis is not on the sin. Emphasis on this exceptional grant of grace of Allah. So, Ram in this context can be read in two ways. Number one, along with him went many a companion who also submitted at last to the will of God and returned without performing the Hajj. So, under Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam blessings, it were they also, they too, whose Hajj was accepted, and they were also given the promise that God had forgiven them till their life. Bayt Ridwan, which was being conducted, is mentioned elsewhere in the Holy Quran with the same purpose. So when you talk of sins as such, because Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam was to symbolize this special grace of Allah, so he is addressed in singular. But his companions may have committed some sins as well as some faults, may have been inadvertently committed by them. So because this verse here covers not only Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam but all of them, so the expression is something which is common to all, which can be read in the context of all the companions. But when it comes to Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, then Ram can only be translated in relation to his own person and his own piety and innocence. And it is this second aspect to which I'll turn after the translation, please.
In the same chapter.
In the same chapter, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لقد رضي الله عن المؤمنين إذ يبايعونك تحت الشجرة فعلم ما في قلوبهم فعلم ما في قلوبهم فأنزل السكينة عليهم وأصابهم فتحا قريبا. This Ridwan, which was granted to Sahaba, is unanimously believed to be a Ridwan for life. Normally, when people die, then you say Razulullah. But this Ridwan, Bayt Ridwan, is called Bayt Ridwan because they were also granted the security against sin, and they were also granted a pardon till the end of their lives. This was never done before in relation to any person who ever performed pilgrimage. But after the translation, then I'll turn to the second aspect. When I said Zamb means different things in relation to Sahaba and Rasulullah sallam, what I meant was that in relation to every person, the word Zamb should be understood differently in the context of what that person is. You see, if some people are born in a society which is given to evil, which is a rough, short society, where the boys roam in the streets like urchins and there is no religious or moral background, even a courteous word from them looks like a piety, and their ordinary rough language is not taken note of as a crime. But in case of prophets of God, even a slight lapse in courtesy is considered as if they have committed an offense. So the prophet's behavior, though normally described with the same Arabic words in the Quran, has a completely different meaning. For instance, in case of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I will demonstrate to you the sort of sin, the sort of zamb he might have committed, and the sort of zamb which is mentioned in the Holy Quran. If that is zamb, then I don't know what piety is. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, bismillah. Abasa wa tawalla an ja'ahu al-a'ma. That is the surah to which I refer. Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sitting preaching to a big chief who was visiting him, and he wanted so much to have him converted to Islam, because with him would come a large tribe who followed him. That was his concern. There was no ulterior motive. No gain for himself was ever involved. There walks in a blind man and begins to interfere with their discourse. What Rasulullah did, just he frowned. He didn't speak a single word of contempt to his behavior. Is this crime or is this piety? Is it a violation of decency or the decency at its best? You see, the blind man could not see the frown. The noble who was visiting, he could see the frown. So he would be pleased that he didn't like this interference for my sake. The blind man wouldn't know. Yet what was expected of him was even higher by God. And God admonished him for this. And Rasulullah said, Astaghfirullah Rabbi min kulli dhanb. How many times we don't know. So these are the zams of Muhammad Rasulullah. The greatest zam highlighted by the Quran is this. All the rest have to be smaller, or they would have been taken note by God. If this was not left unmentioned, why should God cover greater sins if they were ever committed by Muhammad Rasulullah? Anyone would be proud of such behavior. So the zamb of Muhammad Rasulullah is something to which one can look up to, wishing we could do that. And that would be an act of piety in case of every other common person. What he sought forgiveness for were not sins committed. Anything which he couldn't achieve because of his high ambitions appeared to him a folly, a fault. He wanted the whole mankind to turn into believers, and despite his best efforts he couldn't do. So these are the unfulfilled wishes for goodness, which to his eyes were faults and follies. He attributed the fault to him, never to God. Like as Ibrahim ﷺ said, وَإِذَا مَرِضْتُ فَهُوَ يَشْفِينِ. So one should understand the meaning of the Quranic text in the context of to whom it applies.